What is the fast flush test? Okay, so I told you fast flush will tell us what you have set up the whole system. And you're telling me, ma'am, I want to know what's the dynamic response of the system that I've set up. I really want to know what's the natural frequency. I want to know how much is the damping. I can't really rely on what's given in the package which has come, because of any reason. You just want to know what's the actual current condition, right? So I will tell you, okay, go ahead, do the fast flush test. Okay. So what is this fast flush? So you're going to push NS at a very high speed through the artery. Okay. So because you need to come it at a very high pressure and high speed, it's going to flush. Okay. So what will that give you? That will give you, obviously, if you're flushing something to the arterial cannula, it's going to give you some kind of artifact. Any kind of manipulation in your arterial system will actually show in the form of artifacts on the screen. So I'll show you how does it look like. Okay, you tell me that you want to do the fast flush test. Okay, this is the waveform that I've got on the monitor. So what will happen in the fast flush test? You will get something like this. If you see this is a square artifact. Okay, it's a square wave artifact because it looks like a square, obviously. So this is an artifact which has appeared on your monitoring screen. Then you will have some number of oscillations. Okay, so after this, so this artifact means what? This is the phase during which the NS is going very fast. Then the system will try to stabilize, right? So there are going to be some oscillations like this. And then it will again come back to its. Then you'll get the arterial readings again. Okay. So what I've drawn over here, there is a square wave artifact which has happened. Okay. There are some number of oscillations which have occurred. And then I've started getting the arterial BP reading again. Now, what is the benefit of this? I told you I'll know the dynamic response of the system, right? So there are peaks. There are two peaks. There are two adjacent oscillations. So this is one oscillation, this is second oscillation. These two adjacent oscillations which are there, you can do this manually also, or else the monitor itself, the machine, the system with software which is there, it will calculate and give it to you. Okay. So what it will do, it will see the peaks. Okay. Then what it will see, that what is the height of these peaks. All right. So starting from here, okay, so it will take the height. Okay, so the higher peak is how much? Now I'm giving example of from Miller's. The numerical examples are for Miller's, but it can be any. It's just an arbitrary number that I'm giving you as an example. Not necessary every time it is this. Okay, so suppose this height came to 24 mm. Okay, and the height of this, so this height came to 24, and this height came to 17 mm. Got it? So this height is 17 mm. Okay, this height has come to 24 mm. Okay, so after this, what's going to happen? The system or you also can do it. So for example, if you are printing this on paper, you can sit and calculate it, right? If you're not printing this on paper, it's quite difficult. So then the module only, the software will do it for you. So we'll calculate something which is known as the amplitude ratio. Right? This is amplitude of the two oscillations which have got, the two sequential oscillations, and we will take the ratio of this. Okay. So how will I do the ratio? So I will do 17 upon 24. The second peak and the first peak. So second upon the first. So this is an example for Miller's, pre-solved already. So it comes to 0.71. Okay. Now, the other parameter which is understood from this is natural frequency. So this amplitude ratio is one value which we have derived. There is another value that we will derive which is known as the natural frequency. So how will we get the natural frequency? Okay. So the distance between these two oscillations. So there are these two oscillations which have occurred, right? So we saw the vertical height. Now we'll see the horizontal distance. Okay. So this is the horizontal distance. So this is one point here. This is the other one here, right? So this is the horizontal distance. This horizontal distance is calculated. So either you calculate it by looking at the graphical paper or the computer will do it for you. So if this value suppose has come to 1.7 millimeter, okay, this is again example of Miller's only. So I'm not telling you this is going to happen in every patient of yours. It's just for understanding. So now we know what is the speed at which the ECG is moving, 25 millimeter per second, right? Your ECG paper. Okay, this is just a point you need to understand. So when you do an ECG of a patient, any patient, the paper has a speed at which it moves and the ECG graph comes on it, right? So that speed of that paper is 25 millimeter per second. Just because you are seeing the ECG on the monitor, on the screen, on the multipara monitor, doesn't mean that speed is different. Okay, that speed is also 25 millimeter per second. Okay, that ECG is almost going in parallel to this arterial, right? We saw previously there's only like a very hardly delay. There's a very little lag. Otherwise, it's almost matching. Along with this, so if you will see the ECG, okay, if this is this, how it is, the ECG will look like this. So basically, the ECG will correlate with this. Okay, that means what I'm trying to tell you, the ECG on the monitor is going at the speed of 25 millimeter per second, and this wave, the speed at which it's going forward, okay, it's going to be at 25 millimeter per second. Speed of moving forward, okay. So now how will you know the natural frequency then? Okay, so that means what? Again, so you will do the speed of this paper. The speed of the paper is going at 25 millimeter per second. Okay, right? And we have got 17 millimeters, right? The one oscillation, the distance is 17 millimeters. What is natural frequency? It is event per second, right? What is the event we are seeing over here? We want to know the natural frequency of the system, right? So how much is it? We'll explain in a term of hertz, right? So when you divide this, okay, what it gives you some value which is 14.7. It's maths just calculated. 14.7 hertz. Why am I writing this as hertz? Because this is millimeter on top, okay, per second. So this is number of events per second. So by doing this simple thing of fast flush, we have been able to understand two things: amplitude ratio and natural frequency. Okay. But natural frequency though I got 14.7 hertz, right? Exactly the value that I want. I want in hertz, I want natural frequency. But amplitude ratio, you will tell me I want damping coefficient. I don't want amplitude ratio, right? I need damping coefficient. Now you will tell me amplitude ratio is not of use, right? I need to know two. You told me I will tell you two values. I will tell you natural frequency and damping coefficient by doing this fast flush test. So now see the diagram. You can see what I have explained to you, right? Here they have taken, this is what I have explained to you. Okay. Now, can you see that there is this graphical, some representation over here, right? What is this graphical representation? You can see a curve is there here. Vertically, you have amplitude ratio. Isn't that what we just found out? Amplitude ratio. Horizontally, what I am having, I've got the damping coefficient, right? I've got the damping coefficient here. So if I have got, and what is my answer over here? Amplitude ratio 0.71. Chalo, let's see on this amplitude ratio. Okay, so I will see amplitude ratio 0.71 comes to here. This point over here on this graph. What is the answer I'm getting over here? How much is the damping? 0.1. Okay. 0.1. This is the important. So what will the computer do? Computer will calculate amplitude ratio. Then it will see on this already information is fed into the system. Okay, computer has it. If it doesn't have, you will also have a printout of this graph. You can, if your amplitude ratio has come maybe 0.5, you will see, okay, what is the damping coefficient over here? Somewhere around 0.3, 0.2 to 0.3 somewhere. Okay, 0.2, 0.3. So you have to refer to this graph every time you calculate the amplitude ratio. Then you will get the answer of damping coefficient. Okay. So this is what is explained in Miller's. All these photos are from Miller's only, graphs and tables. So if you will refer back to Miller's, you'll understand this it's very easy. When you look at Miller's, you will feel, oh my God, so much physics, so difficult. But it's not difficult. It is very easy. Okay. Okay. So now we'll move forward to components of the whole system. Okay. Now I told you that I showed you some photographs, right? On which there was a pressure bag. Okay. I told you in that pressure bag, we will have a NS filled bottle, 500 ml containing NS filled bottle, which will be flushing the arterial line. Okay. Why we want to flush? See, there is something known as fast flush. There is something which is known as continuous flush. So you know that if blood collects anywhere, it can cause a thrombus, it can cause occlusion, right? Do we want the blood to get stagnant over there? No, right? We don't want the blood to get stagnant. So that's why we always need a continuous flushing. Okay. So that pressurized bag, which you will pressurize. Okay. So NS pint is on the IV stand. You have covered it with that pressure bag. You have inflated it to 300. Okay. And then you have switched on. The whole system is in connection with the patient. Okay. So that pressurized bag will keep flushing the arterial line. NS will keep flowing through the artery of the patient. Okay. At the rate of 1 to 3 ml per hour. 1 to 3 ml per hour, because we don't want any thrombus formation. Now, you will tell me, I don't want any thrombus formation. I don't want any blocking of my radial artery. So, ma'am, can I add heparin? Yes, you can. You can add heparin to that NS that you are preparing. You can add heparin. But always remember one point. You cannot puncture that bag. You can't puncture that NS bag. When you are adding heparin, you make that puncture for the IV set, right? From that same puncture point, you have to deposit the heparin. Don't prick the bottle. Don't prick the bag. Okay. Concentration in normal saline has to be 1 unit. I'm sorry, yeah. 1 unit per ml NS. Okay. The concentration has to be 1 unit per ml. So 500 ml NS, you will add 500 unit heparin. This is understood? That is 0.1 ml. Okay. So you will add 0.1 ml of this heparin in that NS bottle. Okay. Now you will tell me, ma'am, if the patient is in ICU and I'm doing arterial BP monitoring for this patient, so can I continue heparin for such a long time? You will have that doubt, right? Because heparin causes what? It causes heparin-induced thrombocytopenia, right? In a patient who's receiving heparin continuously. So in those patients whose artery is transduced for invasive BP for a very long time, don't add heparin. It's okay. Okay. Just continue the flushing. That pint is there, right? So it will continue it, right? So no need to add heparin if you're having continuous arterial BP monitoring. But if you're using in the OT 1 to 2 hours and you want to add, you are free to add. No issue. Okay. Now revise on why we want to do, arterial BP monitoring. So obviously, one of the reasons is what you want beat to beat BP monitoring, right? Why are you doing it? Why do we want to be so invasive, enter the artery of a patient? You want continuous real-time BP monitoring. So there are some surgeries where you want this continuous BP monitoring. Okay, major surgeries, pheochromocytoma, major abdominal surgeries like Whipple surgery, cardiac surgery, neurosurgery. Okay, in the neurosurgery, orthopedic spine surgeries. Okay, patient is receiving NORAD, DOPA, vasopressors, beat-to-beat monitoring we want, right? Patient is having maybe, cardiogenic shock, hypovolemic shock, septic shock. It's so difficult to get manual BP readings. Readings are sometimes very low. So that is the time when we want beat-to-beat BP monitoring so we can titrate our inotropic drugs, right? Then if the patient is having some massive trauma, if there is a surgery where you're expecting, okay, massive blood losses, massive fluid shifts can occur, massive transfusion might be required. Those surgeries, you will put this BP, this arterial BP line, okay? Then if you're in a cath lab procedure, okay, if you're doing some closure of the VSD, ASD closure, mitral valve, balloon mitral valvotomy, any procedure done in cath lab, angioplasty, okay, so that stenting, right? So that is the time you have to put this line. Then if the patient, you have to take again repeated ABG, patient is in the ICU, every day 3 times you're sending ABG. Can you keep pricking the patient so much? No. So take an arterial line and keep taking your arterial ABG samples from that. You can take ABG sample. In fact, you can send all the blood samples from that. No problem. Okay. Then if the patient's NIBP is not coming properly, you can take an IBP. Then if you want to know from the arterial waveform, I will explain to you ahead. There are certain conditions like aortic stenosis, okay, the aortic regurgitation, hypertrophic obstructive cardiomyopathy. There are many other such conditions where the waveform, which we saw the normal waveform, will be distorted. As I told you that we want to take samples and all that, right? ABG samples. So we need to flush that system, right? So that's why again we need the flush. So the flush is needed for what? For clearing the system of blood and for knowing the dynamic response of the system. Okay. Now you have this transducer, as I showed you that light blue plastic device that you could see over there in that image. That was a transducer. So this transducer which is there, what is the job of the transducer? It's going to convert. Okay, so the transducer has got it's got normal saline from the IV set. From the IV point, normal saline is going to transducer. And from the other side of the transducer, there is an arterial extension going to the patient. So transducer is between NS point and patient. What does this transducer do? And it's got an electrical cable. So transducer is going to convert all these, the waves, right? So if a pulse wave is coming, it's in the form of a mechanical energy. Transducer converts this mechanical energy into electrical signal and sends it to the monitor. And then it will display it in the graphical form on the monitor. Okay. This transducer, the principle behind it is based on the Wheatstone bridge principle. Okay. So Wheatstone bridge principle is nothing. There are 4 resistors. Okay. R1, R2, R3, R4. There are 4 resistance. Out of which 3 resistance values are there. 4th one is variable. Okay. That will generate a voltage. That voltage will be going as an electrical signal to the monitor and display the arterial waveform. That is it about the transducer. Okay. You have to remember that it's a Wheatstone bridge principle. It has a silicone diaphragm. Diaphragm will keep vibrating and it converts the mechanical impulses to the electrical impulses and it sends it to the monitor. Now, once you have set up I'll show you a video now. You're going to make the system open to air. You are not opening patient to air. You are opening the pint IV extension transducer to the air. Patient end is closed. Pint IV set transducer and air. This is going to be in communication. Patient is out of this when you are zeroing. Okay. So I will show you a video on that. You will understand how zeroing happens. There is something known as leveling. Okay. Leveling means what? The level at which the BP reading we want. Okay. That is known as leveling. Means you will keep that where the transducer is located. If it is located very high, very low, it will not give you correct reading. Where do we want the transducer to be located? We want it at the level of the aortic root. Aortic root. Now you will tell me on the body, where is aortic root? Where should I keep the transducer? Aortic root is 4th intercostal space, mid-axillary line. 4th intercostal space, mid-axillary line, somewhere here is which is corresponding to aortic root. That point is known as phlebostatic axis. Okay. So whenever, if you keep it at the level of aortic root, it will very reliably give you the reliable BP readings at that level. That is what you want to know. Okay. If I'm keeping very high, very low, I will not get a reliable BP reading. Okay. So I will show you a video. You will be able to understand very nicely in that. Okay.
Okay.
So are you able to see the different parts over here? Right? He's showing you the line that is going to the patient. Okay. Now he's showing you this plastic horizontal, that square device, which is the transducer. On that, now he will press that spring-like thing. That is the flush. So if I press it, a very fast bolus of NS will go into the artery. Okay. That is the flushing system. In front of that, can you see that there is a white color 3-way? So now he's showing you that that point where he's touching, that is off. So wherever he turns it, that is closed. So close to the atmosphere. Patient end is closed over here, okay? And this is the opening of the three-way, right? So I can attach a syringe over there, okay? I can aspirate my blood sample. I can flush NS through it and clear the arterial line. So that's from where I can do my blood sampling, okay? Now see what he's trying to show you. He's showing you here what? Where is the phlebostatic axis? Okay, fourth intercostal space, mid-axillary line. All right, that is the point where transducer should be placed. So some people prefer to keep it on a stand. Some people even fix the transducer on the patient's arm. Okay, because that will ensure it's at the right level. Okay, so now see, he brought the stand near the patient. He has already attached the transducer. He is seeing at that same level, he is going to place the transducer. Okay. So this is, what is this he's doing? This is leveling. Level at which the transducer should ideally be. This is known as leveling, nothing else, okay? Now what he is doing, he has leveled it. Now he is doing something known as zeroing of the system, which means what? He has closed the patient end. He has opened the cap. He is pressing the flush now. NS will move very fast from the point and directly outward. Then he will press the zero button on the monitor, zero art line button. And then you will see zeroing will appear on your screen. Zeroing complete will appear. Zeroing complete appeared. You replace the cap back on the three-way. And now you will connect the patient. So you will close it to the atmosphere now. He's going to close the three-way to the atmosphere. And now the patient is in communication with the NS point. He has flushed the system. There is something known as Allen's test. So if I'm going to take the radial artery for putting the cannula, and suppose the ulnar artery is blocked, who is supplying the hand? Radial artery, ulnar artery, correct? If I puncture radial artery 1 time, 2 times, 3 times, I'm not able to get, the cannula is not going. And then suppose radial artery got vasospasm. Ulnar artery, I did not check. Ulnar artery is not giving blood supply to the hand. What's going to happen? Distal ischemia, hypoperfusion of the hand. Can we allow that to happen? That's a fault on our part, right? We cannot let that happen. So before you puncture the radial artery for taking a radial artery line, cannula, arterial cannula, you have to do something known as modified Allen's test. What is modified Allen's test? So lift the hand of the patient like this. Okay, it's on the bedside. One hand at a time. So I took this hand of the patient. Okay. Now I'll tell the patient, make a fist for 30 seconds and I will press the radial artery and I will press the ulnar artery. So I have pressed it very hard. 30 seconds, I will wait. Okay. I will wait for 30 seconds. What do I want to see? Ulnar is working or not, right? 1 second. So I want to see if the ulnar artery is working or not. You can do it for yourself. So now after 30 seconds, I'm supposed to see release ulnar artery. Okay. So first I'll ask the patient to open the fist. Can you see the fist has become completely white? Huh? Fist has become white. Now I'll release the ulnar artery. It will become pink. Patency of the flow in the patent. I can now safely cannulate radial artery. The original Allen's test from where actually this modified came. Okay. So that I have... I'll just quickly tell you what is the original Allen's test. So original test, what they were doing, they took both the hands of the patient. Okay. Then what they told, they applied mid fist. Okay. Ask patient to make a fist. Then press both his radial arteries, both the radial arteries for 1 minute. Then you open his hand. Okay. If filling is happening, that means ulnar artery is patent. What is the difference between both the tests? In the original, they were doing both the hands together and they were compressing only one artery at a time. In modified, they're doing one hand at a time and you're pressing both the arteries and then releasing turn by turn. That is it. Okay. Now, I'll just show you the abnormal arterial waveforms. Okay. So aortic regurgitation and all, just quick photos. Okay. I think you are able to see this photo. So this photo, I've taken it from Miller's. Okay. You can see here, there's normal arterial waveform. ART is written and red color, you can see it. Okay. Here, aortic stenosis has occurred. Can you see the difference? Here, how the upstroke is going vertically, almost vertically, very fast upstroke. Here, the upstroke is very slurred. It is angulated. Okay. So that means what? This is known as pulsus tardis. Okay. Then what is pulsus parvis? Can you see that the amplitude, the height of the wave has reduced? The height of the wave is this much over here, normal, right? Aortic stenosis, height of the wave has reduced, right? So small amplitude. So pulsus parvis et tardis is seen in aortic stenosis. Okay, so we are getting a clue from the arterial line. Okay, patient has aortic stenosis. Okay, so now we have a picture, okay, which is showing us aortic regurgitation. What can I see over here? We all remember how the normal waveform looks like, right? So systole has happened properly. Systolic upstroke is good, but there are two peaks. There are two peaks in the systole. So this is two peaks, means two systolic peaks. Pulsus bis feriens. This is known as pulsus bis feriens. And can you note that the height of the wave has increased, which means widened pulse pressure. Okay. So this is the case of aortic regurgitation. So the appearance of your graph will give you a lot of clues about the patient's cardiac condition. So here I have taken a picture. I think this is from Miller's only. Okay. So can you see over here that upstroke is still happening the way it should happen, right? The upstroke has happened, but can you see that there is after the upstroke, there is in the middle of systole, there is an obstruction. An obstruction has occurred over here. So this is known as spike dome pattern. So spike dome pattern is seen in HOCM, hypertrophic obstructive cardiomyopathy. So here I have shown you the real picture on the monitor of the patient. Okay. So can you see that over here? This green is the ECG. Okay. Red is the plethysmography, SpO2. This blue is the SpO2. Red is the IBP, arterial line. Okay. Can you see that the arterial line alternate of them, their height is variable. Like here the height is less, here the height is more. Again the height is less, then height is more. Less, more, less, more. So that is alternating large and small amplitude pulse. Pulsus alterans. Okay, so pulsus alterans means it is severe left ventricle systolic dysfunction. There's a problem in the systole of the patient. Very severe problem. That's why the peaks are going up and down, up and down. Okay, pulsus alterans. Okay. Can you see that the same pulsus alterans which I showed you, you can see in this over here. Okay. So what has happened in this pulsus alterans? You can see that there's alternating. These two arrows are showing you, right? The pulse peak, the peak is going up and down, turn by turn. So pulse alterans, which is severe left ventricular systolic dysfunction. Okay. Then you have what I've shown you down. You can see that there is the decline in the systolic BP over here. See, here also systolic BP, right? The peak tells me systolic BP. The peak tells me systolic BP. Here the peak are going up, down, but they are not going very much. There's not a lot of difference. Can you see here the peak is going so down, significantly down. There's an exaggerated decrease in the systolic BP during spontaneous inspiration of the patient. So when this is known as pulsus paradoxus, okay, which is seen in cardiac tamponade. So the arterial waveform will give you many clues of the patient's cardiac condition. Tell me, I will not only take radial artery, ma'am. I want to try somewhere else also. What every time radial artery? I'm bored with it. I want to practice elsewhere. So radial artery is one option. Ulnar artery is one option in your hand. Okay. Brachial artery is also an option. Axillary artery is also an option. Okay. So all these arteries can be taken. Radial and ulnar are collateral for the hand. Okay. Brachial artery doesn't have any collateral help. So if you land up causing any thrombus or something in the brachial artery, okay, and the brachial artery is gone, you're going to really compromise the circulation of the hand. Okay, this forearm and hand. Axillary artery is fine. If there's any issue which like it actually gives you the central pulse because it's closer to the heart, right? So the central pulse, the central BP values are actually more, the BP value is more accurate over here in the axillary artery. Okay. And the chance of axillary artery to have a thrombus or, other issues are very less. So, and axillary artery can be taken in ICU also for long standing if you want to keep a cannula. It's a big artery, right? Second biggest. Femoral is the biggest. Second biggest which you can take is axillary. So the chances of all these complications are lesser over here. Okay. Then you will tell me, okay, I want to take in the leg. Hands I'm not getting. Surgeon has put the drapes and all. So I'll tell you, okay, you can take in the leg. So where you will take in the leg, dorsalis pedis is one artery where you can take. Posterior tibial artery. Both are in the foot. You can cannulate dorsalis pedis and posterior tibial artery. Okay. Next, which else you can cannulate? Femoral artery. Okay. So these are the arteries which you can cannulate. And one more over here, temporal artery, superficial temporal artery also can be cannulated, but this is very difficult. Please avoid this because its course is very tortuous and it is very close to the cerebral circulation. In case by mistake an air bubble enters, no, it will go and cause cerebral circulation occlusion. So it is better that you avoid such sites. There will be some problems which you can encounter. You can encounter bleeding. Okay, your artery may go into vasospasm. Okay, so you might not feel the pulse very well if you multiple times prick it. Okay, infections can occur. Okay, you can have ischemia. So distally, as I told you here, the distal ends, okay, of the limb can have ischemia, can occur, gangrene can occur in severe conditions. Okay, and pseudo aneurysms can develop, AV fistulas can develop by mistake. So there are certain number of complications. Arterial embolization can occur by mistake. Embolus can form and dislodge. Okay, then these are the few complications. Then there are some contraindications where you should not use. Obviously, here, now suppose a patient is having Berger's disease or patient is having Raynaud's. Okay, already circulation is compromised, right? If the patient is having full thickness, all this is burnt and scarred tissue. You can't. Okay. If the patient is having infection over here, you can't. Okay. If the patient is having uncontrolled bleeding, PT-INR and everything is deranged, platelets are deranged, imagine how are you going to stop arterial bleeding? You can't. Contraindicated. Okay. If the patient is receiving any systemic anticoagulation, patient is on warfarin, patient is on heparin, you can't. It's going to cause severe bleeding again. Okay. Atherosclerosis, again, you should not. Atherosclerosis, where you see it is usually encountered in the bigger arteries like axillary artery, or most commonly it is encountered in the femoral artery. Atherosclerotic plaques could be there. So when you're putting your arterial cannula and that the technique of femoral artery is just like how you're putting central line, Seldinger technique with the help of a guide wire. Okay. So in case a guide wire going to hit that atherosclerotic plaque, it can get dislodged into the circulation. Okay. So if since beginning you are aware that there is an atherosclerotic plaque, then you should not take that vessel.